Hello and welcome to Anti-Doping Updates, Episode 4. This is the show where I give you a weekly update of the latest news in anti-doping efforts from around the world. Today I've got 3 stories to talk about. First is Marina Arzamsova, who is an 800-meter runner. Second is Andressa de Morais, who is a discus thrower. And third is Lewis Parry, who's a MMA fighter in the UFC. So let's get right into it. So the first case is Marina Arzamsova. She's an 800-meter runner, and she was the European champion in 2014 and world champion in 2015. In July 2019, she submitted an out-of-competition sample where both the A and B sample tested positive for ligandrol. Ligandrol is a drug that was developed to treat conditions such as muscle wasting and osteoporosis, but is banned by the World Anti-Doping Code because it can be used to stimulate muscle growth. The Athletics Integrity Unit is the independent agency that handles the disciplinary process for world athletics. They, after testing the A and B samples, they requested an explanation from Marina Arzamsova about how the ligandrol was in her system. And her defense was tainted supplements. And she said that she sent one of her supplements to a WADA accredited lab in Lausanne for testing. It was BCAA 211, and it did test positive for ligandrol. And her explanation was that she went to a training camp in training for the European Championships, and a friend and former teammate of hers in Russia bought it in an online shop and gave it to her when she competed at the European Championships in Minsk. The AIU issued a notice of charge for an intentional violation, which is a 4-year ban. Marina Arzamsova requested a hearing, and the Athletics Integrity Unit held a hearing in November of 2020. And so in order to be successful against a charge of intentional doping when your defense is contaminated supplements, the Athletics Integrity Unit indicated that Marina Arzamsova would have to prove, number 1, that she took the contaminated supplement, number 2, that and she'd have to establish a causal link between the contaminated supplement and her positive test. And the AIU concluded that Marina Arzamsova had failed on both of those counts. They did not find plausible her explanation that she actually took the contaminated substance, because she couldn't provide any receipts showing that she had actually purchased the contaminated supplement. And they did not find plausible her story that she got the supplement from a friend of hers at the training camp in Minsk, who'd got it from an online shop in Russia. They just didn't find that there was the documentary evidence showing that she'd actually purchased that. Secondly, the Athletics Integrity Unit relied on expert testimony from their scientist, who indicated that based on the amount of ligandrol that was in the contaminated supplement and comparing that to the results of her drug test, there was such a low amount of ligandrol in the contaminated supplement that would not have led to the type of positive test that she had with her sample, and that the more likely explanation was that she had a more significant dose of ligandrol closer to the positive test. And so, therefore, the Athletics Integrity Unit found that it was an intentional violation of a prohibited substance, which is the 4-year ban. And so that's what Marina Arzamsova had. So her ban is going to be 4 years. The next case to talk about is Andressa de Morais. She is a Brazilian discus thrower who is ranked 9th in the world with a personal best of 65.98 meters. In August of 2019, Andressa competed and won the silver medal in the 2019 Pan Am Games, and she submitted an in-competition sample, and that tested positive for S22. S22 is a SARM. It's a prohibited substance in the category of anabolic agents. It's also known as enbosarm, ostarine, and MK28066. It was developed to treat muscle wasting and osteoporosis, but it has muscle building growth properties, and that's why it's a prohibited substance under the World Anti-Doping Code. And again, this is a case where the Athletics Integrity Unit, which is the independent agency that handles the disciplinary process for World Athletics, they had the results management responsibilities for this case. And they asked Andressa for an explanation, and she said that in July of 2019, while she was traveling in Europe, she ran out of her supplements, and her doctor in Brazil had a prescription for vitamin D, vitamin A, rhodiola, creatine, caffeine, beta-alanine, and L-leucine. And her mother took the prescription and took it to a compound pharmacy in Brazil. And the compound pharmacy takes the prescription and manufactures it into a powder that she can take using the directions from the prescription from the doctor. So Andressa picked up the prescription from the compound pharmacy in Brazil when she returned. And then after being notified by WADA, she sent it to a WADA accredited lab in Lausanne, and it did test positive for S22. And the compound pharmacy acknowledged that they had used S22 in the production of different products earlier in the same day as the date that they manufactured Andressa's sample. So the Athletics Integrity Unit agreed that she'd shown that Andressa had shown that she took a contaminated supplement and that she purchased the contaminated supplement, and the contaminated supplement was the result of her positive test. So therefore it's not an intentional violation, and the starting point for any mitigation of sanction is 2 years. So in order to have it reduced from 2 years, she would need to show either no fault or negligence or no significant fault or negligence. And here's the standards for those. So no fault or negligence means that the athlete must show that she used the utmost caution to ensure that no prohibited substance entered her system. And no significant fault or negligence means the athlete must show that her departure from the strictest standards of care was not significant, and there are legitimate reasons for why she failed to take all the steps required. So with that in mind, the AIU noted that it's widely known that food supplements can be and sometimes are deliberately contaminated with banned substances. It's also widely known that supplements produced in compound pharmacies in Brazil are notoriously known to have contained banned substances that result in adverse analytical findings. And they noted that there are several cases involving just that point, where athletes had tested positive for banned substances that were as a result of contaminated supplements produced by compound pharmacies in Brazil. On the other hand, the Athletics Integrity Unit also noted that Andressa had used this compound pharmacy before and hadn't had any problems with it. And that her doctor had also discussed with the compound pharmacy the need for purity in producing her supplements, and that there had been no cases of banned substances showing up in supplements from this particular compound pharmacy that she used. So with this in mind, the Athletics Integrity Unit was able to reduce the sanction. Instead of the 2-year sanction, she has a 16th month sanction. And they also found that since she accepted the provisional suspension, that the 16-month sanction would be backdated back to the when she accepted the provisional suspension. And so that means her suspension is August 2019 to December 2020. This next case is, I think, a really interesting case. It's Lewis Parry, who is a mixed martial arts fighter who is going to fight in the UFC. Now, the UFC is not a WADA signatory, but they do have their own anti-doping program that's modeled after the World Anti-Doping Code, and it is administered independently. It's administered by the U.S. Anti-Doping Association. So they do have some independence with their doping program. Although the UFC program is modeled after the World Anti-Doping Program, there's some key significant differences. First one is they have something that they refer to as a sit-out period. And that means when a fighter is offered a UFC contract, they have to they go through a onboarding program, and part of that onboarding program is they sign a declaration form where they're asked to indicate any and all banned substances that they may have taken in the previous 12 months. And if they have taken any banned substances in the previous 12 months, then they have to sit out for a period of 6 months, and they have to have 2 negative tests before they are cleared to compete again. So that's the sit-out period. The other departure from the World Anti-Doping Code is that if the individual is able to prove that their positive test is a result of a contaminated substance, a contaminated supplement, then that's considered not an anti-doping violation, and there's no sanction for that. So those are the 2 main differences. So back to Lewis Parry. In August 2019, he signed a contract with the UFC and started his onboarding program. And on his declaration form, he indicated that he took 20 supplements, including an asthma medication and testosterone and EQ, which he last used in July of 2018, which is more than 12 months prior to the contract. And so since he hadn't taken any, so the substances he used in the previous 12 months were Ventolin, USN anabolic whey, a corticosteroid, and USP Labs Jacked 3D. EQ is equipoise, and that is a brand name for a veterinary drug that includes Bolderone, which is a banned substance. It's an anabolic steroid. So because he hadn't used any banned substances in the 12 months prior to signing the contract, he did not have the 6-month sit-out period. But then in September of 2019, he submitted 2 samples for testing, and the A and B samples tested positive for drostanolone, stanozolol, DHCMT, and boldenone. And all these are anabolic steroids and prohibited under the World Anti-Doping Code and prohibited under the UFC anti-doping policy. And so in December of 2019, the UFC issued a provisional suspension on him, and Lewis Parry responded that the positive result for drostanolone, stanozolol, and DHCMT were the result of contaminated supplements, and the positive test for Bolderone was because he mistakenly indicated July 2018 as the ending date for when he took EQ, but that was actually the starting date of when he started taking EQ. And he also indicated that the UFC had not adequately advised him of his rights and responsibilities under the UFC program. And so in February of 2020, UFC notified that he would be in a sit-out period for 6 months, and then extended it because he had another positive test in December for anabolic agents, and extended it again based on positive tests in December, January, and February. So he's had a number of positive tests in a sit-out period, and so the sit-out period keeps getting extended because he needs to have 2 negative tests, and he's had 3 positive tests. And so the UFC also asked, since he was claiming to have contaminated supplements, the UFC asked Lewis Parry to submit his supplements to a WADA-accredited lab in Salt Lake City, Utah. But instead, Lewis Parry indicated he would send his supplements to a WADA-accredited lab at King's College in London, the UK. So, but he didn't do that until May of 2020, months after he was asked to do that. And meanwhile, in September 2020, Lewis Parry fought and went about in a different promotion, the UAE Warriors promotion in the United Arab Emirates. So the UFC held a hearing in October of 2020. They were scheduled to, but the day before the hearing, Lewis Parry asked for a postponement, claiming that he had contracted COVID. And so the UFC, in response to that, amended their charge letter to include a charge of tampering. And I'll get to that in a minute, about what they mean by tampering. So eventually, the case went to an arbitrator at the McLaren Global Sports Solution. And in the arbitration decision, they found that Lewis Parry had not proven that the results of the positive test for gestanolone, stanozolol, and DHCMT were the result of contaminated supplements, and therefore rejected his contamination defense. The charge of tampering was based on non-disclosure without compelling justification. That's what tampering means. He tested positive for gestanolone, stanozolol, and DHCMT, but didn't disclose that. He only disclosed the EQ, which was the bolderone. That's the only thing that he indicated that he had taken on his declaration forms. And so the arbitrator agreed with the charge of tampering. Next, the arbitrator examined Lewis Parry's argument that the UFC had not adequately informed him of his rights and responsibilities under their program, and they rejected that defense also. There had been evidence of numerous communications with him about his rights and responsibilities, and he had adequately been informed of them. And last, they looked at aggravating circumstances. And the arbitrator found that in this case, there were some significant aggravating circumstances under which his sanction should be increased. First, they noted his repeated requests for repeated attempts to delay and request postponements. He never proved that he actually had COVID, and there was the delaying until May of sending the supplements for testing. And also, the arbitrator noticed that there was some major discrepancies in the supplements that were sent to King's College. Lewis Parry sent 2 supplements to King's College, the King's College lab. One was an unopened container, but this was manufactured after the date that Lewis Parry claimed that he took the supplement. The second was an open container with just a small residue of powder left in it, and the powder wasn't homogeneous. It looked like it had large granules of something else in it. So it looked like, according to the King's College lab, like someone had just deliberately put stanozolol into it. That's why the powder wasn't a consistent size and appearance. And so the USADA found that, or the arbitrator agreed with the USADA about that they'd proven presence, they'd proven tampering, and they'd proven aggravating circumstances. And therefore, the sanction for Lewis Parry is 4 years. So starting with the date of his provisional suspension in November of 2019. And that only affects his ability to fight in the UFC. It doesn't affect his ability to fight in other mixed martial arts promotions, because this UFC anti-doping program only affects the UFC, not any other promotion. So he's free to fight in any other organizations that promote mixed martial arts. And that's it for anti-doping updates for this episode. If you like it, tap gently on the subscribe button and tap gently on the like button. Don't smash it, you'll break your phone. Thanks and have a great day.